I'm Andrina. I lead our teaching and learning team at Coursera, and I'm really excited to see all of you. I hope you've been having a productive conference so far, and I'm looking forward to spending the next hour together sharing some of what we've learned thus far at Coursera and our approach to designing learner-first content. Coursera got its start about 4 years ago when a Stanford classroom of about 400 became a global classroom of 100,000, when Andrew and Daphne decided to put their content online and see what would happen. And the response from learners was really unprecedented, and it galvanized Andrew and Daphne into action, going beyond their own content and putting that online and really reaching out to create a global community of partner universities across the world that now can reach out to a global community of learners that's more than 18 million. Over the past few years, the world of MOOCs and the view of Coursera has really swung widely from this novel idea that was going to become the answer to all educational woes to a disappointment, something where only 4% of people, which still was hundreds of thousands of learners, were completing courses. And now I think it's really starting to stabilize to where it belongs. It's an exciting and growing tool for empowerment. It's putting access to life-transforming learning experiences in the hands of our learners. And our vision is that we can help to create a world where anyone, anywhere, can transform their life by accessing the world's best learning experiences. But how do we do this? And really, this focuses in on the anyone. It's our learners. It's the ones that are looking for this knowledge and transformation. It's enabling them to achieve their goals and to change their lives. And this is not new knowledge to you. As you see, your own conference here for the past few days has been focusing on exactly this, creating learning experiences that are keeping students at the center. And I hope that by the end of this session, you'll have an even stronger understanding of the impact that we can have by designing learning experiences specifically for that learner, and some new ideas that you can incorporate into any of the content that you're creating. It's the students, the learners, that guide all the steps to creating the best learning experiences for them. Learners like Lamari, whose story I want to share with you now.
I was born in Puerto Rico, a very festive culture. I graduated from college and I kind of was stuck in a limbo. I didn't know what to do. Then I got pregnant, and when I had my child, I really wanted to stay at home with him. A great colleague of mine in advertising said, "I have the perfect job for you in social media." And that's when I started to look for different courses that would give me the in-depth knowledge I needed. And I bumped into Coursera by a friend's referral, and I saw that they had a course on content strategy, and I took it and it changed my life. It was more than just like the courses. It was a drive. It was a discipline that was needed for me to finish those at that time. And I moved on from that first stint as a community manager for $7 an hour to this big advertising agency with a great title and big brands and this pressure to be perfect as a woman, to be the perfect wife, to be the perfect career woman, to be the perfect mother. And it's a lot to carry. So that's when I realized, something has to give, something has to change. That's when I started contemplating the idea of going on my own, and I did. And I haven't looked back ever since. The work that I do now gives me more flexibility and enables me to spend more time with my kid, to spend more time with my friends or me time, which is very important, and to also make music. And that's a very nice balance. And the only reason I have that is because I took these Coursera courses and I built a career that satisfied my needs. Y me pregunto qué pasaría si echamos el miedo a un lado.
Lamari is a prime example of one of the more than 18 million learners that access our platform looking for change, 40% of which come from emerging economies. The majority are in the college age to kind of recently post-grad with some level of degree in employment. These are the learners that are coming, looking for more, looking for something different in the educational space. And if we look at some of the statistics of today's workforce, it's not so surprising that there's this unmet need for learning in terms of the need to change jobs that don't exist yet when you're in the midst of studying on campus, and wanting to prepare for that next step. But it can be daunting. So how can we focus on learners when they're all so different? And can we truly help all of these learners, or is Lamari a unique case? This is exactly the question that we wanted to understand when we undertook the first longitudinal study of open online learning in collaboration with the University of Pennsylvania and the University of Washington. In December, we surveyed learners that had completed a Coursera course at least 4 months prior and received responses from almost 52,000 learners from 212 countries and territories. And we found that 52% of learners were coming to the platform with career as their primary focus and objective, while another 28% were coming to the platform looking specifically for something around academic improvement or preparation to go into an academic setting or return into an academic setting. And we found that we are, in fact, making real impact. 87% and 88% respectively of the learners that responded to the survey said that they had received some sort of career or educational benefit. And if we dive even deeper, we can see that these learners are finding not only kind of intangible benefits where they feel better about what it is that they're doing, but also concrete, tangible benefits. For the career builders, they're finding things like the ability to start their own business, or to get a new job, or to get a raise, things that are fundamentally changing what they're then able to do in their lives. And for our academic seekers, they're also finding the ability to get transfer credits or to give them the ability to enter into an educational program that otherwise they wouldn't have been able to do. Given the demographics of MOOCs and what we've all heard in terms of these are people that are already well educated, these are people that are coming from richer situations or from developed nations, it would not have been surprising to find that these were the people that were getting the highest level of impact from our courses. But through the study, we were actually pleasantly surprised to find that despite the academic, language, and geographic barriers, learners from non-OECD countries and low SES and low levels of education were often reporting equal or higher benefits than their advantaged OECD counterparts. These differences became even larger as you moved to lower levels of SES and education. So while all of those, or a large number of those that were completing courses were reporting benefits, as you moved into these different subsections and looked through them, you were seeing that people were even receiving more benefits when they were in more difficult situations. And so here you can see our wall of learners and instructors that we have at Coursera headquarters, which helps us to remember why it is that we do what we do. The impact that we're having is real, it's global, and it's transformative. And it's only possible through the work that we do with all of our partners. So when I say the work that we do, I truly mean the work that we do. It's thanks to you and all of our global partners that we're able to work towards making this audacious vision a reality. As a partnership, we meet in the middle, where you're bringing the expertise of the content subject that you're teaching, and we're bringing the platform. And we're splitting revenue right down the middle as we work towards making transformative changes for our learners. At SUNY, your program is robust and growing. Already in 2016, you're offering double the courses and have tripled the number of paid learners from last year, creating additional revenue, which SUNY is then able to reinvest in the creation of new content and allows us to continue developing the platform for learners. The value of courses is clear. Over the last year, SUNY has launched 2 specializations, one in nonprofit governance and another in career brand management. These, however, are the numbers. Let's look at some of the real learners that have been impacted by your courses. So here we have a stay-at-home mom from Canada who's trying to get back into the workforce and volunteering to gain more professional experience. She took the first course in the specialization on nonprofit governance from SUNY Albany, and to be able to improve her needed understanding and confidence in her volunteer work in the boards, which she now expects to lead to a new career in that nonprofit sector. And here we have a note from Balma, who was working to launch his own business, recognizing that he was being vastly underpaid by the local franchise. Balma took the first course in the career brand management specialization and couldn't be more thankful to all of the dedicated instructors from SUNY Empire State. It was those instructors that not only provided the knowledge that Balma needed to manage his professional brand, but they're also the ones that helped him to see that while the content was challenging, it was achievable. Their focus on their learner's experience made Balma success a possibility. These are your learners, and there are plenty more out there, both online and on campus, waiting to learn from you. Which brings us back to our opening question: how? What's the pedagogy of these learning experiences that lead to transformation? As we already noted, it's about putting learners first. It's about meeting them where they are and understanding where they need to be. That's the transformation that you're looking to help them achieve. It's about providing them the opportunities to practice their new skills that will take them to that place where they want to go, and the opportunity to demonstrate their mastery of those new skills so that then others can see where they're going and help them get there. Ultimately, it's about creating the right materials to teach them those needed new skills and delivering them in a way that works with their schedule so that the power of learning is in their hands. It's on this trajectory, this path that you're creating for learners, from where they are to where they need to be, that our team of pedagogy and production experts, the teaching and learning team, focuses our time and attention. We're learning from the million of learners on our platform to develop best practices for content creation, to guide the development of the platform, and to streamline the overall process to make this easier for you. We've broken the development into 4 key components: content strategy, learning objectives, application and assessment, and accessible instructional materials. With this critical final step of continuous iteration, with final in some great air quotes given that iteration is never quite finished. During this second piece, I'm going to talk through some of what we've learned in each of these components, sharing best practices and research that we've done in conjunction with our analytics team. For the research that I'm going to be showing in the different data points, what we did is we took all of the data from our courses that we're currently running on the platform, combining metadata that could be pulled directly from the platform, for example, learner retention, engagement, number of length of items, inferred value through certificate purchases, and then we combine that with human annotation, where we asked learners to annotate different courses and videos specifically also to understand things like their impression of learner animation or instructor animation, the value of the videos, the level of interestingness of the content, the way in which they were engaged, that intangible that you can't just pull from the platform. And we pulled this together to try and understand what makes for a successful learning experience. The first piece that we're looking at is this idea of content strategy. Where are the learners right now? What knowledge is it that they're thirsting for that they need to take that next step? What you'll see here is in the top 3, so business, computer science, and data science, these are areas that stood out to us early on as being really important for learners. And partners responded in kind, creating content in those areas kind of across the board. Given the content that we now have, we're able to have a more nuanced understanding of the current gaps, and then we're working to really specifically fill those gaps so that we're able to make sure that for any learner that comes to the platform in one of those areas, that they are able to get from point A to point B, regardless of what those A's and B's are for that learner. The bottom 3 are areas that are more newly coming into light as core needs for our learners. Particularly interesting, I think, is the category of professional and personal development, which encompasses skills that are not always directly taught, but are recognized as being critical to continued success. And it's not often until learners have left a more traditional learning environment that they realize how important it is to have these and need a place to find them. Your content area of choice is really the overlap between your passion and your expertise. What gets you excited about teaching, and what are the learner's needs? Once you've identified, and you need that particular area, that overlap, you need to zero in on the starting point and the end point of what's going to be your typical learner, that path for the learning experience that you're creating. This path of development may start from your area of interest, but you really want the learner to be your guide. What is the story of a particular learner or a typical learner in your course? This will be your guiding light throughout the content creation process. Remember, the M, the massive in MOOC, is not by trying to teach everyone that might have some interest in your subject area, but it's because there are a lot of learners that are interested in that particular path that you're going to be teaching. And so the more that you can really define that to understand where the learner is and where they should be going through your content, then you'll be able to match up really well your content with the learner that needs it. And that's where there's the most opportunity for success. Here's an example that we use for one of the areas that we're looking for. So let's say your expertise is in teaching Python, and what we found to be the learner need is using it for data analysis. There we can develop the story of our learner, Ashley, and see what it is that she's doing today in terms of being a business analyst, and where it is that she's trying to go. Her need to be able to take data, use the different Python knowledge to be able to analyze it, and really take that next step in her career. And so then, once you've decided this is the path that you're trying to take learners through, you can really use that to develop the next steps of your content. And that next key component is focusing in on the set of objectives for the learning experience that you're developing. You're concretizing what it is that's along that path that's going to take your learner to the next level. We really want this to be about the learner. How should they be different after the experience of taking your content? As we concretize what Ashley needs to know to be able to do to achieve her goal, to go from point A to point B successfully. There's 3 key components to these performance-based objectives, and you'll look at them differently as you're doing them at the course level or at the specialization level, and then as you dive in deeper when you're looking at it for each module or week of content that you're delivering. But you really want to be able to outline what is it that they're doing. What is the situation that they're going to be in to be able to do this? Are they getting a data set? Are they being asked to do it in a particular time frame, right? Like, what is the environment? And then what is the situation for success? How do they know that they have successfully completed that set of objectives? And so then you build upon that to really say, these are the things that someone will be able to do or have through successfully completing the learning experience that you're creating. Once these pieces are in place, then we can focus in on the application and assessment component of the course creation. This is where I can dive into some of the research that I was mentioning. Here what we're looking at is credential value on the y-axis as a function of learner-rated understanding on the x-axis, and we've broken it into 3 buckets of learner-rated difficulty. So the first thing that you can see is that there's this group of classes in the red line on the bottom right from your perspective. These are courses that, from the learner perspective, have been marked as being really easy. So they're easy to understand, and as you can see, the learner-rated understanding is very far on that right side of the curve. But the credential value is also pretty low. As you move towards the left side, you get things that are more challenging, some that are understood, but not all. And then all the way to the left is where you get to the really challenging set of content. There's a wider range of courses that fall into that bucket, and often they're very technical. Interestingly, as you go up in level of difficulty, you get a higher credential value. So learners are realizing that there's this value to understanding tough material, and they want to understand that tough material because their learner-rated understanding within this green bucket, if you will, say in this kind of Goldilocks area where people are really able to improve their understanding through the area of the course, this is where learners are most satisfied with their experience. So they want to come in and understand that tough knowledge. And as you're able to help them move from a lower level of understanding to a higher level of understanding, they're satisfied and excited about their learning experience. And so how do we really maximize off of the fact that they want to master hard material? They realize that that's where the value is, but they need your help towards that mastery. This is where a scaffolded set of assessments opportunities are so critical, because they need the chance through the assessments that you give them, the practice that you give them, to recall the information that they're learning, to be able to assess if they are really understanding what they're doing, to be able to show what they're now capable of, and to reflect on that new knowledge. When we work with partners to create content, we talk about creating both formative and summative assessments. And so in the formative bucket, you're helping learners to monitor what it is that they are understanding and not understanding. And you're giving them the opportunity to practice, 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 as we know that that's really where that learning is deeply taking place. These you want to happen throughout the content that you're teaching. So whether it's through videos or readings, for every piece along the way, you want to give them the opportunity to practice and see if they need to go back and relearn the content. And then at the end of a larger chunk of content, what we call modules, this is where you want a summative assessment. This is where you want to be able to grade against some rubric that they were able to meet the learning objectives that you set out initially. This is both for you, the instructor, to know that they're hitting that and then can move forward, as well as for the learner to return back and say, okay, I've mastered this piece of content, I can now move forward. On the Coursera platform, we have 3 key forms of assessment: quizzes, peer review, and programming assignments. For quizzes, there's sort of your typical, there's multiple choice, there's free response, and there's also reflective questions. And one thing that I would note is that often the word quiz even just denotes something that we don't think is that tough. But you can really get complex. You can go all along Bloom's taxonomy in terms of how deep of knowledge you are using these quizzes to engage learners with. So you can start at the earlier stage and really go in deeper with some of the content. Reflective questions, I think, is a particularly interesting component that we have, as early feedback is really valuable, and for learners, it's also really valuable for them to be thinking about what it is that they're learning, which they don't always give themselves a chance to do. And so with these reflective questions, you can be putting them into the quizzes, but it's a more open-ended thing. And so they're getting credit just for putting in the effort to respond to the question. And as such, you're rewarding them for taking the time to think back and realize what you're doing, which research has shown really helps them to solidify that learning and to feel better about what they're doing so that they are motivated to continue forward. For peer review assignments, this is an area where I think partners often have the most trouble translating what they're doing on campus into the online setting. We're creating a really great peer review experience is hard work. First, you're coming up with the assignment, which is often similar to something that you would do on campus. But then you need to really dig in and understand how is it that you grade a learner when you receive their paper? And how do you set up a set of rubrics to teach the learner to grade their peer? When this is done really well, and our team often works closely with instructors as they're developing these, the learner is not only gaining knowledge from having completed the assignment itself, but they're also gaining through the process of reviewing the assignments of others. They're getting to see the examples of the work that others have done, and they're also applying that rubric, which they then learn to apply to their own work as they're moving forward. Programming assignments can be really valuable, in particular for technical courses, where you want to be able to get into more complex types of assignments that are not as easily graded by the algorithms that you can set up in a quiz. And so here, by creating auto-graders that we're able to host on the platform, you're able to create a much more complex type of assessment, but that can still be automatically graded by a system as opposed to needing to bring in a person. The other component to this is often when you're creating code or if you're writing code to solve a problem, there's not only one right way to be writing that particular set of code. And so to have another learner or to even try and just type match what someone has written into if they got the answer right doesn't quite fit. And so instead, you need a system such as an autograder that can put in a bunch of different potential numbers or words or whatever it is that you're working on to test the output and see if the thinking process, if the algorithm that was developed by the learner was the right one. And the programming assignments allow you to move in that direction. The important component to all of these is that they're giving feedback to the learner quickly. So one of the great things about the quizzes as well as the programming assignments is that the feedback comes immediately. One of the great things about the peer review process is that they can get more in-depth feedback from their peers than just yes or no, this was right or wrong. Regardless, they also need help from you in terms of that feedback. So when creating formative assessments, for example, we really see that as an opportunity to teach through the answer. So if someone isn't getting it right, to teach them how to get it right, and then to go back and give them a different example of the problem that they can work on. Whereas for summative assessments, you're usually pointing them back to the material, showing them that they haven't quite gotten it yet, and giving them the opportunity to practice once again until they really reach that level of mastery. When we talk about accessible instructional materials, the last step was thinking about what are the assessments that they need to do, the practice opportunities that they need to get to that point B. These are the materials then that you're creating to help them be able to successfully complete the assessment. And accessible is not just about being able to reach these materials online, although that is an important component. It's about aligning to the learner's schedule, attention, and other needs. Starting from a scheduling perspective, we realized that learners are busy. When we first started out on our platform, courses were available in really distinct session times, right? They started on a certain day. If you weren't there by a certain amount of time, then you probably missed some of the assignment deadlines, and you needed to wait until the next time, and that was an unclear, when the next start date was going to be. And so about 1.5 years ago, our platform really started a transformation, moving to on-demand content. But what we didn't take into account from the very beginning is exactly how hard learning online is to do on your own. And so while having everything available totally on demand was great from a learner perspective of accessibility, it didn't help to bring learners along through a cohort or through even giving them guidance of how long things should be taking them. And so we iterated. We iterated quickly and learning from our learners. And we first started by putting in suggested deadlines and then putting in rolling cohorts, automatic cohorts, so that we kind of found this best of both worlds situations in which the content is essentially always available. At most, you're waiting 1 or 2 weeks to be able to fully jump into the whole course, but you're always able to take the new content. And from the instructor perspective, once you've set your course, these cohorts are automatically reoccurring. This isn't taking time from you, which is what it used to take to be able to restart the content. And so here, we've really reached a place where we've gotten a 2x completion rate on content just by learning from our learners what the schedule should be. And now we're working to go even further on that completion rate through other content components as well as platform components. Another area in which we looked through this combination of metadata and annotation research was specifically trying to understand what makes for good MOOC videos. As we know, when you remove the lecture component from being on campus, video is what usually takes up the majority of that gap. And so we asked learners to annotate videos on a ton of different things, from subjective impressions of how engaging did you find the video, how animated was the instructor, to descriptive annotations. So what was the production quality like, how many instructors were there, all the types of things that we can't just automatically pull from the video. And we found that a lot of these things were very correlated, and so we ended up collapsing them into one dimension, this idea somewhat of interestingness is a notion of this for the general audience. And so many of us may feel that interestingness is innate. Either you have it in the subject that's being taught or you don't, and usually the things that we're teaching we think are pretty interesting. But what we found is that by annotating hundreds of these courses, we were able to isolate some components that makes us think that interestingness can actually somewhat be taught. And the more interesting that learners are finding this content, the more that they're being retained, the more they're staying engaged. So what does it take to be interesting? Before I jump into specifics of these components, in case you think the results may be skewed, the #1 rated interesting course by the learners was in fact Jim Fowler's Calculus 1 course. So while I think that calculus is actually a really great subject, my background is in engineering, and I very much enjoyed it. In general, I don't think that's what we would have pulled out as something to be the most interesting. But I really encourage you to check out his course online and see if you can get an understanding of how his persona, how his ability to be really animated and passionate with his learners when he's talking about functions and integration, his ability to speak to the learner and really focus on them even through this this video medium is what's allowing him to really connect and be interesting as he teaches calculus. And the last point here is about good production values. And I don't mean having to go out and spend a ton of money on the videos. It's about being really thoughtful on how you're using video and on what are the different components that you have, as well as making sure that they're clear, easy to understand, both from an audio perspective as well as what's on the screen. Going back to Jim's calculus course, he doesn't actually have high production values from the perspective of cost of it. He's using, for the most part, note cards that he's writing and a system where he's set up to have his iPhone facing downwards to be able to walk through problems. But he's able to do it in a really crisp and clear way that gives it that production value that's needed. The other piece here in some of these examples are just about really using video mediums wisely. They're not just a replacement for the lecture because you can't be there in person or because your learners can't be there in person. There are things that you can do in video that I can't do on this stage. One of the examples on your left is from a physics course, in which he's able to show the passing of time and this idea of acceleration in a way that isn't possible here using the video. You're also able to take people on field trips, virtual field trips, if you will, or show demonstrations that would take hours long, but through time-lapse you can do different things. With the advent now of 3D video, we're even able to put that on the platform. And so there's lots of different ways that you can use this to go beyond the normal lecture style. One of the other pieces that we found that just seems more interesting is that speaking quickly is also associated with better retention. One of the hypotheses here is that usually when people are excited, they start talking a lot faster. And so by really being comfortable sharing your excitement as you talk about your subject matter, you're bringing in the learners with you on that path. And I wouldn't underestimate how important it is to think about these different components of what keeps a learner retained. Because unlike all of you here that may feel a little bit guilty if you were to stand up and walk out of the room, people do not feel guilty closing their phone, closing a window on their computer if they just don't continue to see the relevance of what it is that they're learning, even if they really do want to get to that next step. Another component that we found aligns with better retention is having more in-video quizzes. So this is an opportunity that we have on the platform to put quizzes within a video. It stops it, so often grabs your attention if maybe you were starting to wander your mind away. And it asks you to recall or to engage in some way with the content. So a way that you might do in class to stop and ask if people have questions or to take a poll so that people can see what are the different thoughts in the room, or make sure that people are understanding the concept that you just covered, can be done through in-video quizzes. And again, you're engaging the learner, you're helping them to see the importance of what it is that they're doing. One of the pieces that we found here, if you look at this and you say, oh, it just kind of looks like a cloud of dots, true. We did not find that there was any clear correlation between how long the videos needed to be and how long people were paying attention. It's really about letting the learner and your content guide what's needed here. The idea isn't to be short for the sake of being short, but really about thinking, what are the key components that people need to learn? What's the essence of this material that I need to make sure that I pass on? A tight, clear, cohesive lesson delivered well is one of the best things that you can offer your learners to help them get through this process and reach their point B. So I talked about using videos really well, as that's one of the key mediums that we often use in online learning. But it's not just about videos. And one of the things that we're working really hard to do is to develop different types of resources that can go into your courses on the platform so that you're able to engage with learners in different ways, ways that have to do with what content it is that you're teaching and what's most relevant there. And so one of those are readings and course resources. So not everything fits nicely into this package of a module or a lesson, but some pieces of content are things that you need all along the course. So whether it's the syllabus or FAQs or a glossary, depending on the type of content that you're doing, this can live outside of a particular module, so learners can always be accessing it. And then readings are another great way to bring in different resources, so it's not always just video, allowing learners to learn in different ways as well as to see what other resources are out there that they can also be looking for. Two other areas where we're trying to innovate on content types to help meet your needs. One is slideshow. So we know how difficult it can be to make videos, not only the time and the energy that it takes to create them the first time, but then you'll likely see them later or decide that you want to teach something in a different way, and there's a lot of energy and cost that goes into revising those. And so the idea with slides is that you can share information without necessarily making a full video. You're putting audio with the visuals, and then these can also be a lot easier to edit. And so that gives you the opportunity to think about what is really the perennial content. What are the things that are evergreen in this course that really are going to gain value from seeing me presenting the material, from going on site, from doing the things that video can do best? And then what are the pieces that instead you can be showing the visual and walking them through it with the audio to better understand and give yourself that room for easy and fast iteration. Discussion items are another point that we saw that are trying to help fill the need of how do you bring the discussion directly into the stream of the course content. So there's always the discussion forums, but here with these discussion items, you can have a video and then a reading and then the discussion item. And it comes up right in the midst of the overall learning process. And it asks learners to respond in some way to a question that you're posing, either reflecting on what they've been thinking about or how might they answer the particular case that was just covered in the video before. And then it allows them to see what other learners are responding to that same question. And we see that this really increases participation from learners to a really high level, where they're able to engage directly with the question and with their peers right away. And so that last and continuous piece of iteration. One of the really cool things about the platform and about having content that is continuously starting new cohorts and having new groups of learners going through it is that you don't have to wait for next semester or next year to take things that you've learned from one piece and improve it to take it on to the next one. Instead, as soon as you open your course for the first time, you have learners coming in and you can learn a ton from them immediately and you can iterate on your schedule. So maybe you have a free weekend or you decide to dedicate time once a quarter or whatever it is to going back through your course content and making tweaks and changes based on the learners that are actually in your course, not the ones that maybe you were expecting. And so here we have something called content flags. And so learners are able to flag different pieces of content and then to also be able to leave a note explaining what it is that was difficult or wasn't working for them. And sometimes these are technical, and so we can jump in and make them better. And other times it's things that were confusing or unclear, and there you can jump in and see if you need to reword a question or add an extra piece to the slide so that people can understand what's going on. You can also look at grades and statistics of the things that learners are doing. So now where in a class of 100, you may have had one student that didn't understand what was going on, in a class of 10,000, that one question now bubbles up much higher. And so there you're able to see, was this something where the learner was having trouble or, was the question written unclearly? Was it actually testing something that I meant to cover in the video but I didn't actually cover? This helps you to unearth different areas of concern and then go back and improve them in a way that's really data-driven, hopefully giving you the tools to see, here's a flag, and then you can dig in and see what it is that isn't quite working right. Course ratings are another way to understand what it is that learners are thinking or how they're feeling about the course content. And so learners that engage with a course are able to list on a scale from 1 to 5 what it is that they think about that, as well as leave a review. And we found that both looking at the highest rated reviews, telling you what's going really well, can be really helpful to make sure that you're continuing to do that, as well as looking at those that had the toughest time with your course, the ones that aren't happy. And there we can see sometimes it's just a mismatch, right? Perhaps the way that the course description is written doesn't exactly explain what it is that is going to happen in the course. And so learners are coming in expecting one thing and getting something else. Or perhaps the prerequisites weren't clear, and so learners are coming in and they're not ready for the content. Whatever it is, we want to know so that then we can improve and make it better. And one of the things that we are working on now is content A/B testing. So a lot of what we are doing in terms of iteration right now is gathering learner input. So either the flags that they're putting in or what it is that they're doing and not doing, and then trying to infer why that's happening, right? With content A/B testing, we're also starting to be able to take it to the next level, to have a hypothesis around, whether formative quizzes are really helpful or not in keeping people engaged, or in which courses they're really helpful to make sure that you're improving your knowledge. And we can test them on different populations of learners to come up with best practices that are then generalizable that we can take across different content. And so with that, I really turn it back to you. This is a lot of what we've learned so far, and we are continuing to learn, and we do this in collaboration with the courses that you're creating and working really closely with you throughout that process. MOOCs are not easy, and I'm not trying to stand up here and pretend that they are. They take people, they take time, they take money. But hopefully it's clear that it's worth the effort. The impact that you can make on learners everywhere is very big. And there are ways to make it happen. There's available financial support both through internal to SUNY through IITG funding, for example, or through the Coursera proposal process, as well as project management and content development support, again, both through SUNY and through Coursera. So here's an example of a course that was in fact made through one of the IITG funds. And you can see from this learner story, this course has been on our old platform. It was recently moved to the new. More than 5,000 learners have engaged with this content. And this learner story that's up here is from April. So content that was created over a year ago is now being continuously reused and accessed by learners whenever they're ready for it, whenever they need it. In terms of that management support, as a partnership, it's really clear to us that you're bringing the content knowledge. You are the expert instructors. We're bringing the learners to you and support through every step of that process to figure out how to make that content ready for the learners that are going to be there. And as I said, this is on both sides. This is coming from SUNY and the support that you can get from Lisa, as well as Coursera and the support that you get from the partnership manager, Kat. And both are here today, as well as very accessible to you. And so the question stands, whose life will you transform? With that, I'm happy to take any questions. Or not. Yeah.
Under the quizzes area, you talked about the reflective questions, and I'm curious, and I kind of came in a little bit late, so I'm not sure if it was covered, but is there feedback on those reflective questions from, like, how do they know whether or not their random's reflection is,
Yes. Yep, let me make sure everyone heard the question. So the question was on the reflective questions, can you have feedback, or what exactly are people then doing with that reflection? Is that right?
Yeah. I'm just wondering, people, as they're learning, will have all sorts of assumptions and all sorts of levels of understanding, and their reflection, to me, in my, opinion, would only be, contributing to their learning if they get some feedback, some corrective feedback, perhaps even on, what they are saying. And they may be completely wrong.
Yep, nope, that's absolutely right. So there are a few different avenues for that type of reflection and then corrective feedback. So the reflective question in quizzes would be getting feedback that you would put in a priori. So you could do that in a few different ways. The idea behind the reflective within a quiz is that the grade is tied to the effort. So the fact that you took the time to answer it, not necessarily which answer you're giving. So if you were teaching a course in which you know that there are certain misconceptions that learners usually bring with them, you could set up some reflective questions where the answers, it's actually multiple choice, and you're trying to pull out which of these misconceptions they might have, and then based on the answer they select, you can have already put in feedback there to respond to it. So that would be one way to do it. In terms of having the free-form responses, you can do some word matching if you wanted to be putting in feedback, but for things that need more responsive feedback, there we would recommend either using a discussion forum and like a discussion item, and then in the prompt having learners not only answer the question themselves, but then instructing them to go in and read through some of their others and choose a few to respond to. And there we've seen that the learner community really is quite diverse and usually very open to helping each other. And then another place you could do it is you could also use ungraded peer reviews in a similar way, where they're not mandatory to the completion of the course necessarily, but they give an opportunity for a learner to put in their reflection or to answer a question, and then for you to have created a rubric that guides other learners into how to provide feedback to those thoughts. Yeah.
I think the first of it super interesting and really enjoy it. I have some questions that I think maybe the first one is when you mentioned that when you show this graph pie chart with the main fields that people are interested in, like you mentioned business, computer science, and data science were the three main ones. And I'm in the STEM field, so I was surprised not to see any science and basic science there. So maybe can you elaborate why? Do you have any idea why people are not interested in kind of online STEM education?
Yep, absolutely. So the question here was, why do we see such a desire for kind of that business, tech, and data area and not necessarily the other STEM courses? So I think there are a few different reasons for this. Right now, a very large population of our learners are the ones that are coming for career-focused components. And so for them, it's usually more of this application step. And so that's where they see those business, tech, or data courses helping them really take that next step in what they're doing. We do see interest in some of the more fundamental STEM courses, so calculus, different physical, chemistry, or physics, also biology, different types of courses. There's a few different reasons I think that they're not quite as high. One is that being more fundamental, this is usually courses that go to our education seekers, and they're there, but they're a smaller population of the learners that are coming to the platform. Also, if you look at the content, a lot of the content that we have currently is more high level, so it's more at the graduate level or later in college courses, and so for some of those education seekers, it may even be too high. So I think we're still trying to find the right sweet spot of what that content is that people need. But usually, as of right now, the goal is to be learning content that they are then able to apply right away, and less of them are looking for those that they're doing kind of at that fundamental level. Yeah? Mm-hmm.
Maybe how often do people give this feedback? That's one question. And the other one is like how do you manage all that feedback and how you prioritize where it's going to impact?
Yep.
Because I guess you will get like opposite feedback as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So the question was, for the content flags, how often are you getting them? And then, what do you do with them? How do you prioritize them? How do you tackle them, essentially? So we find that our learners range. Some are really excited and they really enjoy that kind of feedback component. Others just drive through the content. So in terms of how often, it's hard to say really how quickly you're getting them, but I would say they quickly accumulate. And in terms of prioritization, I would say it's about zeroing in on where you have the most, as like that is your hot spot of places that are difficult. So we try to make it as easy as possible to give feedback. Every item in a course has a thumbs up, a thumbs down, and then a flag spot. And so as learners are engaging with that content, they can just click it and provide that information. And so you do get a good amount of it, but it does usually hotspot into specific areas. And so I would, when we create actually action plans for courses that are underperforming what we would have expected to help actually turn these flags into actionable feedback. So that's one way in which we're able to support that process. Another is through the interface itself, we give you the opportunity to say, okay, this is going to be a to-do item, this is going to be something that I'm going to ignore for now, so you can kind of quell the noise of the things that aren't that important, and go to the ones, if there are flags on quizzes or on other assignments, I would really start there, and then move to things that are perhaps easy to change even if they don't feel like they'd have huge impact, and then to the things that are tougher to change but aren't connected to assessments. Yeah. Yeah, so golden rules. These are ones that we are very much trying to figure out, but I would say there's a few. So right now we actually have what we call the pedagogy checklist, and so we put into place key components that we expect all content to have. So having formative assessments based on the amount of content that you're teaching in each module, as well as at least one summative assessment per module. We really think that the core here are the practice opportunities. So the more that you can make the assignments relevant to what learners are going to be doing when they take your content outside of their online classroom and into their workplace, we think that that is fundamental to the core. So if anything, what we would say is really focus in on what are the assessments that are getting from point A to point B, and use those as your benchmarks, your milestones. If you're going to spend extra time anywhere, spend it there, and on providing really great feedback within those assignments. So all of the quizzes and the different assignments that you're creating have places for feedback that you're putting in a priori, so learners can, get it as soon as they submit their assignments. And then it's going back and creating the content, either the readings or the videos or the slides to take them through it. And there, the other, sort of golden rule would be to focus on your very first module and the welcome video and bringing learners in, but to do that at the end after you've filmed your other videos. Being on video is weird and hard for people that don't do it normally, and even for those that do, I think there's very much a learning curve. And so the more comfortable you can be in that very first piece where learners are first connecting with you is really crucial to bringing them in and helping them engage tightly to the content. Say again? That you shouldn't do. Nothing, the opposite of all of those, right? In terms of creating content without feedback and those types of things. But outside of that, I don't think so. One piece on the shouldn't do side is thinking that you'll be able to get through as much content, or just trying to translate an on-campus course into an online setting and sort of porting over the materials. There's very much a transformation process that happens to the content, and so making sure that you are taking it from that on-campus learner and thinking about the online learner and spreading out the material if needed, breaking it into multiple courses. One on-campus course would likely be multiple online courses, and helping learners zero in on the component of the course that they really need. Yeah.
Earlier in your presentation, you gave us two really good questions. One is, what's your learner's story? The other is, how are you going to be different? How should the learner be different after they take the class? It's a different kind of question than we ask, because we're assessment focused when we ask, what can they do differently? Those are two different questions, and I wonder if we're being pushed too far in the do
to make sure everyone heard it and it's captured. It's about, the question was, as you're thinking about the learner story, there's a lot of talk and focus on what are learners going to be able to do differently after they take the course, but there's also a question around how are learners going to be different after they take the course, and what are some of the answers that we get for that. Often those courses, or the answers that we're getting when we're getting more of the B side, is around appreciation or ability to engage with different people around the course content, on again, yeah, that appreciation side of, whether it's art or writing or physics, right? Like there are different goals that instructors have when they're creating their courses, and as such bringing in different learners to that content. And so that's where we hit more of the B side of things. And I think there is still an ability to assess that, but it's a really different type of assessment. And that's usually where we rely more heavily on the peer review, for example, because it's much more around how you're engaging with the content and with others around it. There's actually a really interesting course by Professor Keith Devlin, who was at Stanford and then moved it to Princeton, and I think he took it back to Stanford. But it's about mathematical thinking. And so for him, it's very much around how are learners engaging with proofs or with mathematical concepts, and then how are they explaining it to others? Not just, can they use it, but how do they explain it and engage with it? Yeah.
I noticed that some of the courses start on one date and finish on a different date. Some of them are what you call learn at your own pace. I just wonder how you decide the kind of format a course follows, and is there different retention or completion, I should say, between those two?
Yep, absolutely. So the question here was about the open courses that are totally learn at your own pace, and then others that have specific start and end dates. What we found is that those with specific start and end dates definitely help to increase retention, in that we very naturally work towards deadlines, and so having deadlines, even if they're what we'd call soft, that they're more of suggestions to keep you on pace, is really powerful. And so we initially had courses that were totally open, and then we've started moving towards what we're calling the auto cohort model. And having seen how much better the retention is for auto cohorts, we're working on moving all of the content over to that. And that is the kind of next step. Right now, some of it is still open kind of as legacy. One of the things that we see is that you want to have kind of a core set of learners within the course. And so some of the courses rerun every 2 weeks. Some I think are rerunning every 4 weeks. But by having the cohorts run automatically, we're getting kind of the best of those two worlds, where even if I start a course today, actually Monday, they usually start on Mondays, but let's say I start a course on Monday and then I fall behind and I don't finish in what was kind of the expected time, I can re-enroll then in the next cohort whenever I'm ready and take my work with me. And so to that extent, it still is very much learning at my pace, but being able to do it with a set of learners that are also working on that type of material and trying to do it at the rate that's kind of suggested to help me keep moving. Yeah.
Following up on that idea that learners can roll over, do you have a sense of your completion of people, or even just how many people roll over from one cohort to another? Is it like and then how many people complete in multiple roles, or?
That is a great question. I don't actually have that data top of mind, but I think we should have it.
I don't know if this is what you're asking, but I did look up recently. The percentage of learners who take a course and finish it and decide to take another is about 30% right now.
So I'm more wondering about in an auto cohort. So you start a course, you fall behind, you don't finish, you re-enroll in that course, same course, and then either finish or do something.
Yeah, no, I think there's definitely, there's data there, because I know that one of the things that we're working on is how, Just kidding. Okay, so talking about auto cohorts and what are the numbers of learners that finish kind of the first time they enroll and take it all the way through, as opposed to having to re-enroll and finishing it in another cohort. So I don't have that data top of mind, but I do know that one of the things that we've found is that it's not always as clear to learners that they're able to do this rollover and take their content with them. And so one of the kind of user interface components that we've been working on is how to make that clearer for them, so that they do know that they can take it with them, and working towards improving generally the completion numbers and then moving forward. So, but that's something we can definitely look up and follow up on. All right, well, I will be here, and I'm happy to take any other questions, and Kat's down here too, if there's anything else I can help with.